What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Real Life. My name's Brian.
And I'm Craig.
I'm excited to jump into the conversation today.
Yeah.
I always say that, and I think it's because I'm excited a lot.
Well, yeah, same. I'm excited to share, although some of this information that we might talk about doesn't feel exciting to talk about.
Yeah, and sometimes I never know what I'm going to say.
There you go.
So let's figure it out.
Let's work through this.
Yeah, for sure. So in this podcast, we talk about real life, and for us, that means a couple things. That means the real life that I believe, as someone who's a follower of Jesus, I have access to.
Right.
And then also, how does that impact or flow into my real life, into my real relationships that I have?
Actions, decisions, what I say, what I do.
Relationships, from small interactions to the trajectory of my life.
Right.
Like, how does this affect all that stuff?
Right. Because what we believe influences how we act and what we say.
Hopefully. Yeah. Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So the conversation today, we were talking a little bit before the podcast. It's a really I think interesting phrase. And as soon as you said it, I was like, yeah, let's talk about this. Okay. And the phrase that you brought up and what we're going to talk about today is image management.
Image management. That's right.
What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a good question.
You said it first. I was really banking on you knowing what it meant.
Okay. So the idea here is that as we go through life, we were just talking about having real life, that we're somehow spending a lot or a little or an enormous amount, whatever it might be, of time and effort managing what image they have of me. Mm-hmm. That's the idea here that we're trying to unpack. What do people think of me, and how do I act and behave to manage that?
Yeah. Well, that's something that all of us do, managing our image with other people, from little things to brushing your hair in the morning, right? Like how you present yourself physically,
choosing your clothes style,
your outfit. That's image management.
Makeup,
right? But yeah, makeup. Yeah. I have a feeling though we're talking about something a little deeper than just the surface level image management.
Absolutely, that's the surface stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And so when I think of ways that I've tried to manage my image, a lot of it is just tied to kind of a couple things. One, and this is a question I've even asked people before. How do you perceive me? Like how are you perceiving the way that I communicate to you, the way that I act around you? Right. Like and that's a scary question to ask someone. But I think it's if you're brave enough to do it, I think it's a good question to ask. Right. Especially if you give the person permission to be honest with you. Yeah. Because that's an important thing to me. I want to know how you're perceiving me, or how you're viewing me. Yep. Because I want to know if that's the real me. You know. That's why I'm asking that question. Right. I want to know. Is that the real me, or do you have presuppositions about me that aren't true? Right. And then maybe that would help our working relationship. That'll help our relationship, whatever it is, whatever the person, whoever they are in the context of I'm asking that question.
That's a really good point. It makes me think about this term that's been around for a while now, emotional intelligence. And it's all through the corporate world, and you do a bunch of training on how do I be emotionally intelligent. But I read something some time ago talking about emotional intelligence is not just knowing, thinking about how I think and how I project and how I come across, but it's exactly what you just said, is that emotional intelligence piece is how does other people perceive me? Yeah. Because I think some of us can, a lot of people can dig deep and understand how they're thinking and what they're saying and the way they're saying it, the way they're coming across. But even then, you may be perceived differently.
Yeah, someone else is interacting with you through a completely different lens.
Right.
That's why a lot of times when it comes to personality tests and stuff like that, I think those are decent tools. Some people have given their whole lives to study and put together those tests, and they would say like, hey, I'd like it if you respected it more than just a decent tool. And I get it, but and a lot of people will, they hold on to those personality tests as like, this is who I am, which might not be the healthiest thing. No. But to me, I think a really interesting thing to do with those personality tests is like, say you take one, like the DISC profile is one that's like really popular in the corporate world. Like you take a DISC profile. Okay, this is what this says about me. One thing that I think is probably just as interesting, if not more interesting, is I want you to take this test about me. And then compare those two results. Right. I was in an organization one time where the leader, it is just kind of how he talked about it. Was we used DISC profiles, and he was a very driven leader. And I really respected him for it. And the way that he talked about like being driven and being a driven person, it almost like made that extremely valuable in the organization. And then so he didn't intentionally do this, but then we all took these DISC profiles, and all of us knew that the leader really valued this. And so it was incredible how all of us seemed to be so driven, like we were really, really high on the D,
because your influence, your answers are being influenced by what you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that I'm worried about my image. That here's this guy that has a particular bent. He's got a particular style, and I want to look good to him.
Yeah, he values this. Yep. So when it asks this question, even though I'm supposed to be, I'm answering this honestly, there's a part of me that's like, maybe I'll grade that a 5 instead of a 3.
Yeah, No, and I think there's, if I recall on the DISC test, and like I said, there's others too, the Myers-Briggs and whatever else. Some of them have how do I see myself naturally, and then how do I see myself having to act in certain roles in certain places, and then you can see this stress in the variation. And where there's a high variation, if I'm not particularly driven in this example, and I'm in an environment where I have to be driven, there's a lot of stress around that because I'm having to manage this image that I'm more driven than I may naturally be, and maybe I'm creative, or maybe I'm whatever else. I heard this the story the other day of in the world there's people who are 6'6" and they'll be great in basketball, and someone who's 5'6" is not going to be great in basketball, but he might be a good jockey. We have different skills and sets, but we try to constantly force ourselves into sitting with this. In this environment where I'm managing my image to fit a certain environment instead of being true to myself.
Yeah. And man, that's like, I think it's so funny because in this podcast, we talk about a lot of like, really true, a lot of times that causes a lot of anxiety in us. And you and I just kick it around like it's like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, it's easy to sit here and say it, right? But I struggle as much as anybody, if not more, to get out there and be real. It's easy to say here, not easy to do.
For sure. Well, and for me, like, man, it happens all the time. I have interactions with people. I joke sometimes, like, and my wife made the same joke just the other day. She was training a client, and she's having this conversation, and she was like, "Yeah, my husband's a pastor." And the person was like, "Really?" And she was like, "Yeah, normally I try to like hold that back a little longer."
Right.
But it just kind of came out in this conversation. So yeah. Because there's so many like just expectations that are instantly thrown on that particular thing. Right. But it's not just true about pastors. It's true about everyone.
And people say, that's a question all the time, what do you do? Hi, nice to meet you. What do you do?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm a engineer, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, or I'm a plumber, or a electrician, or whatever. And somehow there's an image that person associates with you because of what you do.
Yeah. And a lot of times what people will do is they'll add the "I'm just a."
Yeah.
Like because they're hedging,
right?
Like because what you're talking about, that image, maybe might not be. People might not value so much,
right? Right.
It's all "I'm just a."
Yep.
And man, this is just something that's real that you interact with all the time. That just sits in your brain. Well, I'm just a this, or how do I manage this? How do I make this person view me in a certain light? And most of that for me, to talk about my own experience, is just tied to my ego. Like, and that's a difficult thing to try to avoid or to deal with, is my own ego.
So let's unpack that a little bit. What is the ego, and what is that? What's that about?
For me, and there's probably people that could give you a better definition of like, well, your ego technically is, XYZ. But for me, it's that it's the voice inside me that tries to manage my image. Like it's the thing that'll pop up in my head and be like, well, you better make sure like this person thinks this about you.
Yep.
Like that ego that is mostly tied to self-protection, like trying to protect myself or trying to present myself in a certain light.
Right.
And I was actually just having a conversation yesterday with a friend of mine. And I told him, I said, man, most of the opportunities in my life that I have botched has been tied to my ego.
Right.
Like it's been my ego that's gotten in the way of that opportunity. That's either ruined it or made it more difficult or closed the door for me.
Right.
It was my ego. It was me operating in self-protection, or me trying to manage my image in such a way that ultimately the reason why it closed the door, and I think this is like a really like kind of maybe close to the root of what we're trying to get at. It closed the door because the person that either was giving me the opportunity or whatever picked up on that that's not the real me. You know what I mean? Like that, like when you're interacting with a person
who's
when you're like,
right.
I don't know if I can believe everything that this person is saying.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the thing that's messed up a lot of opportunities for me has been my ego.
Yeah. And the way, and I absolutely agree, and I've done that so much in my life, the way I justify it is, when I get the next step, when I get through this particular situation, I get a promotion, I get I win this friend over, then I will go back to the real me.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna manage the image to get the relationship sorted, to get the promotion, to get whatever it is. Then I will open up but it's just it's a slippery slope, man.
Well, the reality
is
that's backwards.
Yeah,
like that's 100%. It's 100% backwards. I think my ego thinks it's what's opening the door for me.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah.
Like let's just talk about. I can talk about Wellspring, starting Wellspring.
Yep.
My ego did not open up the door for me to start Wellspring. That's not what opened up the door for me.
Right.
I would have never got off the ground.
Yeah.
Like at all. Like what opened up the door for starting Wellspring is knowing that God had put something in me to do.
Right.
And to be. And as I was talking about that to people, and they're identifying with that thing that's very real in me.
Right.
What had it get started, what helped it get started wasn't me going, and I'm going to do this, and this is my 3-point plan, and this is how. What enabled me to do that is me looking at people and going, I don't know how I'm going to do this without help.
Right. But then people who you those people you were real with and said that, they turn around and said, I can see something in your eyes and this is real.
Yeah. As opposed to in my own head going, I'm going to do this. Yeah. I'm going to get this done. Let me present myself as this great church planner who has this like, I'm going to know exactly how to. That didn't open up the door for me at all. Yeah. If I would have had that, if I would have had that presentation, if I would have been so interested in managing my image, I would have never got off the ground. Like we would have never got started. And if we ever collapse, it'll be because of that.
Yeah, really.
Because I allowed my ego
to get in the way.
To get in the way.
Yeah. I think back, there's been a few people in my life who have occasionally, in the middle of a conversation, have said, what you just said then was different than all of the other conversation you've been having. it sounds like everything else you were talking about was kind of fluff, but something changed in your demeanor, Craig, when you said that, and I got an insight into yourself.
You've said that same thing to me before.
Right.
You've said that same thing to me where you go, that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, everything else, whatever, that.
Yep.
What you just said.
And I think what's happening there is managing your image is hard work. It requires an enormous amount of energy, an enormous amount of stress. It is exhausting. And we can't keep up that image all the time.
Yeah.
And every now and again it drops with someone that you care about.
That you're comfortable around.
And that person gets an insight into something that is meaningful to me, meaningful to you if you say that.
Yeah.
And that's a key then to something that you can go on and implement and be more like that.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm talking about when I mean like it's backwards when you think ego is going to get you in the door. Like I'm sure I have used I'm sure my ego has probably opened up an opportunity or two. You know what I mean?
No doubt. It works. That's why people do it.
But the most meaningful connections, the most meaningful impact I've ever had in my life is when I'm authentic with a person.
Yeah.
When they get in and peek the real me.
Right.
And like you're saying, even sometimes by accident.
Right.
Like
right.
That's the
and I think this idea is that it's something that we learn, and maybe it was in childhood or whatever else. You know, someone got angry at us. I didn't like that, so therefore okay, next time I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't me, it was them. They're the ones that got upset, but somehow I feel like then I've got to retreat back into this image that I put on, this mask that I put on.
Yeah.
And because it was effective, it works for a time.
Yeah. I think about that all the time. Just as a dad with my little girls, I think about that all the time. It's like just the different like messaging that they receive from me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't want my daughters to feel like they're not allowed to have their own emotions.
Right.
You know, like I don't want them to feel like they're not allowed to have their own opinions or they're not allowed to, you know, a lot of those things, the interactions I even have with my children, because you're talking about your childhood and you know, it's difficult. I barely remember my childhood. I don't know. Some people I talk to them and they're like, oh, and they can recount everything.
Yeah.
You know, but like there's I'm just very aware when I'm dealing with my daughters of the messaging that they're receiving from me.
Right.
And I was talking to a friend the other day, and I was like, bro, I apologize a lot to my kids.
Yeah.
Like I just go to them a lot and say, hey, a daddy shouldn't have done that. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, daddy said that.
Yeah. That's good.
Or
That's
hey,
really
I'm
good.
sorry I was short with you.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me how you're feeling?
Yeah.
Like I know that you were upset. Why don't you just go ahead and tell me what made you so upset?
So can that apply to other relationships, to adult relationships?
Yeah. If you're brave,
Yeah.
you know, like if you're brave, it's easier when it's your kids because you got that like power dynamic advantage. You know what I mean? Like
and
because
you
I'm
know they're not
dad.
going to run away.
Yeah, I'm
if-
dad. Yeah, you live here. You're trapped here. Yeah, you can't leave me.
Yep.
Right.
And therein lies another fear that I think, for me, this is probably one of my biggest fears about managing my images, is that somehow if you see the real me, somehow if I come forward and apologize, if I've done something wrong and I'm so sorry, or if I let something out, that somehow you will reject me. You'll not want to be around me. You'll not want to talk to me. You won't be my friend.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful fear. It's a powerful fear.
Oh yeah, like the fear of rejection is, I think it's like one of them. It's got to be like tied to probably the deepest fear that everybody has.
Right.
You know, like is, oh no, I'm going to be alone.
Right.
Like you're not gonna. It's not just people pleasing, right? Like there, I think everyone has some people pleaser in them.
Of course.
You know,
Yeah.
like
No, I
everybody
agree.
has that.
I agree.
But the fear of rejection is like deeper than that.
Yeah.
Deeper than like the people pleasing. You know, because sometimes I recognize like I'm a pretty polarizing type of person. You know, like
Yep.
I think
I just make the assumption that most people like me because I know that like you probably either like me or you don't like me at all.
Yeah, right.
You know,
Right.
Like, and I get it.
Right.
Like, and that's fine because I feel the same way about me sometimes too.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I really like me and sometimes I don't like me at
Don't
all.
at all, yeah.
Like, you know.
Yep.
So I get it.
Yeah. And so from a biblical perspective, I think that the Bible is full of scriptures clearly stating who God says I am.
Yeah.
And when I sit with those and understand who God says I am, then if the creator of the universe feels that way about me,
Yeah.
then should be less, if not completely unconcerned with what others think of me. So those moments when I'm feeling that fear of rejection, those moments when I'm managing my image are pointers to me of when I'm not putting my trust in God.
Yeah. Like instead of when I'm so focusing on the image that when I'm so focused on managing an image, right? I lose focus on the image that I'm bearing, right? Like I'm an image bearer,
Right.
Like everyone everywhere you have ever met, like is made in the image of God. They are an image bearer. And when I'm focused on managing some image that someone is interacting with, I have completely lost focus of whose image I'm bearing.
Yeah.
And like, man, if I can live there,
Yeah.
like let me back up. And instead of, okay, here's a meeting I'm going to get in, or hey, here's a conversation I'm in, or here's this conflict that I know is going to happen, instead of me sitting in my ego, like pumping up this image of myself, instead of that, what would happen if I just backed up a little bit and reminded myself of the image that I'm bearing instead of the image that I'm trying to manage?
Who does the Lord say I am?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Yeah, that is a big question.
Yeah.
And that, wow. So how do we get there? How do we come to a place where is there something I can just click my fingers and suddenly I'm okay with being real, authentic. I know who God says I am, and I'm not going to manage my image anymore.
Like you're cured of it.
Yes. Because these folks are only watching this podcast to get an answer, right? So
right.
Here's the answer. Drum roll.
Yeah. The answer is I haven't been cured of it yet.
No.
But I can remind myself, like, and there's a couple ways that I remind myself, like, what God says about me in His Word that I believe is reliable.
Right.
Right. I think that's a good place to go.
Yeah.
Like that He says, "You're my son, who I love, and I'm pleased with you."
Yep.
I like living. I like to be reminded of that.
Yep.
You know.
And then the other place would be around other real people.
Yeah.
Who, as you drop this image management facade, and as you are real and honest and open with them, they turn around and say, I love you anyway. In fact, I love you more because you're that way.
Yeah.
And that encourages that idea of being open and honest. And man, that's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard to do. But it's so important.
Well, it's even in like our struggles and our suffering. You know, our house churches at Wellspring are going through Colossians right now.
Yeah.
And I love in chapter number 1 where Paul's talking and goes, hey, like this is the mystery that was hidden for generations that is now revealed to you.
Yes.
Right? The mystery is Christ is in you. Right? And so when I'm around you and like when I'm around other people and I'm authentically relating to people, like I've dropped the mask, I'm not trying to validate myself, I'm not pumping up my ego, I'm actually in a real relationship with someone.
Right.
When I do that, even in your suffering and even in your struggle, I can look at you and what I'm going to do is I'm going to see like that reminds me of Jesus in you, right? And
that's good.
And the same will be true. And the same is true about me, or the same is true about you. Like when you're around other people, even in your suffering and in your struggle, when you're authentic as a Christ follower, people are going to see little glimpses of, well, that looks like Jesus. Because he's in you. Yeah. Like, that's the mystery of the whole thing. Like, that's the wild thing about being a Christ follower.
Yep.
Like,
and what I love about that too is that Christ in me looks a little different from Christ in you because he made us differently.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we could both be, and I think even Colossians, it uses the word perfect or fully mature, I think is somehow translations put it. But that idea that Christ in me brings out who he created me to be, which is back to that story about, a basketball player or a jockey or whatever, that we're different, that you and I are different, that everyone is different, and that Christ in each of us can look very different, but there's still Christ in us as we fully mature and become perfect.
Even in that process, like, to use the basketball player, as an example, like, knowing that all of us are in a process somewhere. If I was a basketball coach, right, and my daughter was going out to play basketball,
right,
and I started coaching her like she was a Division I basketball player.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And shouting at her like she's a professional ball player. How could you miss that? Like, these are the fundamentals. Are you out of your mind? Yeah. Like, that would be outrageous to put that level of maturity or development on like a child playing basketball.
Exactly.
But if I'm coaching her and I say, hey, what I want you to do, today, we're going to work on dribbling.
Dribbling, yeah.
I want you to dribble from this side of the court to the other side of the court.
Right.
And she dribbles, and she's doing it, and she's doing all right. And, like, maybe she struggles a little bit, and she does it. And I go, okay, you're doing good. Do it again.
Yep.
And then she does it again.
Over
and does
and
it
over
again.
and over
And then what ends up happening, at the end of practice, she goes from one end to the other end. At the end of practice, she goes, how did I do?
Yeah.
And I'd say, perfect.
Yeah. Perfect.
That.
Now, is she an NBA player yet? No.
No, but
that's perfect.
For today,
yeah,
perfect.
There you go.
Like, man, like, if you would view your development as a Christ follower.
It's a process.
That way.
It's a process. It's a journey.
Today, are you that? Not today.
And that's what we do. We try to compare ourselves from someone who's not me and say, well, how can I be perfect? How can Christ consider me perfect because I'm
X, Y, Z, all this other stuff.
And yet I am.
Because what you're doing is you're managing your image that you think, instead of just bearing the image that God gave you.
Yeah.
Like, instead of managing this image, like, just bear the image of Christ.
Reminds me of was it Wooten, one of the
John Wooden.
John Wooden. He had a saying, something about, he even tell his NBA players, was tie up your shoelaces.
Yeah.
That was his get back to basics type of. That was a key or a trigger to say, just do the basics correctly.
Just do the basics, man.
Yep. And so the basics in our life is yes, pray and read your Bible, but also means meeting with others. So we gather on a Sunday morning. We have a great Sunday morning. We do that corporately. But beyond that, it also means meeting in smaller groups and in one-to-ones and having coffees and all of those things.
You need people. What was the first thing that Jesus did? First thing that Jesus did. I'm going to call 12 men.
Yeah.
I'm going to find 12 people.
What, you mean he didn't preach a sermon?
Before he performed a miracle at a wedding, I'm going to pull the
12 other guys.
First things first.
Yep.
I'm going to bring some people into my life.
Right.
And I'm going to be in their life. And then we are going to do this.
And therein is perhaps one of the scariest things I struggle with, and I know many others do, is that if I get too close to someone, they're going to see the real me. And then my ego is getting in the way again.
Yeah.
It's popping up.
Well, and the thing is like, you, if you are living that open-handed type of life where you're like, this is who I am, this is where I'm at, it is infectious. You're going to draw those same type of people. Yeah. And maybe people who aren't ready to do that, they'll start to do that.
Right.
And guess what? Like, man, they're going to see screwed up stuff about you. Like, because we're all a little screwed up, you
Absolutely.
know? They're going to see that about you.
Absolutely.
And
that's okay.
Yeah. And
that is okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
It really is.
Like, because remember, I'm in a process.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, and maybe to kind of tie it back to like church type mentality and all this other stuff, and maybe we can land here, and I can just talk from my perspective as like a pastor. So many times, like people will view or look to a pastor or church people or something like that as like, oh, well, they must be perfect.
Yep. And I want to be like that.
They might have it all together. Yeah. Can I tell you, like, the impact that I've had in people's life is not because people think that I'm perfect. Like the impact that I've had with other people is not because people think I'm perfect. It's because that they know that I'm not.
Right.
Like I remember, and I hold on to this all the time. I remember somebody told me this one time. They asked me, "What do shepherds smell like?" And I was like, "I have
no idea.
I don't know." Mm-hmm. And they go, "They smell like sheep." Like the shepherds smell like sheep. That's what they smell like.
Right.
And so, like, if you're this person who thinks that you have to be this perfect image, you know, to have people in your life,
right?
You know what I mean? It's like, sorry, like you're not going to do that. Shepherds smell like sheep.
Yep.
And you don't have to be a pastor to consider yourself a shepherd. Like, if you're going to have people in your life, like, guess that, like, shepherds smell like sheep, man. Yep. Like, you don't got to smell beautiful. You got to smell like sheep.
I think you said it before so well, is that we know when someone is not being real, when they're managing their image, and we smell when they smell like sheep.
Yeah. 100%.
You didn't say that, but I'm just
it's got
rewording.
It's got a smell to it.
There's something about someone who's real, who's being authentic. They're being open. They're being honest. They're just being who Christ created them to be.
Yeah. Because
He lives in them, and that's incredibly attractive.
Yeah, that's what I want to try to be. That's the family that I want at Wellspring. Like, this is. I heard a pastor say one time, I kind of cringe a little bit when religious people show up to my church. You know, that's what he said, and I was like, I get it.
Yeah,
I get it, because I just want to be. I want to be with people.
Right.
You know, like real people.
Yeah.
And I think like something special happens.
Yep.
Like when you're in that. When you're in that relationship.
Love it, man.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, if you want to come see us live, if you kind of want to be around us, come see what we smell like. It is Sunday morning at 10 a.m.
I don't know about you, but
at the Bear Levin Studer YMCA, Sundays, 10 a.m. Come check us out. And we'd love to spend some time with you.
Love to say hi.
See ya.
Bye.